Hello, my darlings. Mother Raven here with another part of Isaac Asimov's Youth. Lunch was half over when Slim dashed into the dining room. For a moment he stood abashed. Then he said, in what was almost hysteria, "I've got to speak to Red. I've got to say something." Red looked up in fright, but the astronomer said, "I don't think so, son. You're being very polite. You've kept lunch waiting." "I'm sorry, Father." "Oh, don't rate the lad," said the industrialist's wife. "He can speak to Red if he wants to. There was no damage done to the lunch." "I've got to speak to Red alone," Slim insisted. "Now that's enough," said the astronomer, with a kind gentleness that was obviously manufactured for the benefit of strangers, and which had beneath it an easily recognizable edge. "Take your seat." Slim did so, but he ate only when someone looked directly upon him. Even then he was not very successful. Red caught his eyes. He made soundless words. "Did the animals get loose?" Slim shook his head slightly. He whispered, "No, it's..." The astronomer looked at him hard, and Slim faltered to a stop. With lunch over, Red slipped out of the room with a microscopic motion at Slim to follow. They walked in silence to the creek. Then Red turned fiercely upon his companion. "Look here, what's the idea of telling my dad we're feeding animals?" Slim said, "I didn't. I asked what you feed animals. That's not the same as saying we're doing it. Besides, it's something else, Red." But Red had not used up his grievances. "And where did you go, anyway? I thought you were coming home. They acted like it was my fault you weren't there." "But I'm trying to tell you about that, if you'll only shut up for a second and let me talk." "You don't give a fellow a chance." "Well, go on. Tell me if you've got so much to say." "I'm trying to. I went back to the spaceship. The folks weren't there anymore, and I wanted to see what it was like." "It isn't a spaceship," said Red sullenly. He had nothing to lose. "It is, too. I looked inside. You could look through the ports, and I looked inside, and they were dead." He looked sick. "They were dead." "Who were dead?" Slim screeched, "Animals! Like our animals, only they aren't animals. They're people things from another planet." For a moment, Red might have been turned to stone. It didn't occur to him to disbelieve Slim at this point. Slim looked too genuinely the bearer of such just tidings. He said finally, "Oh my. Well, what are we going to do? Golly, we're going to get a whopping if they find out." He was shivering. "We'd better turn 'em loose," said Red. "They'll tell on us." "They can't talk? Not if they're from another planet." "Yes, they can. But remember my father talking about some stuff like that to my mother when he didn't know I was in the room? He was talking about visitors who could talk with the mind. Telepathy or something. I thought he was making it up." "Well, holy smokes. Holy smokes." Red looked up. "I tell you, my dad said to get rid of 'em. Let's sort of bury him somewhere or throw him in the creek." "He told you to do that?" "He made me say I had animals, and then he said get rid of 'em. I gotta do what he says. Holy smokes, he's my dad." Some of the panic left Slim's heart. It was a thoroughly logistic way out. "Well, let's do it now, then, before they find out. Oh, golly, if they find out, we'll be in trouble." They broke into a run towards the barn, unspeakable visions in their mind. Chapter 9. It was different, looking at them as if they were people. As animals, they had been interesting. As people, horrible. Their eyes, which were neutral little objects before, now seemed to watch them with active malevolence. "They're making noises," said Slim in a whisper, which was barely audible. "I guess they're talking or something," said Red. Funny that noise which they had heard before had not had significance earlier. He was making no move towards them, neither was Slim. The canvas was off, but they were just watching. The ground meat, Slim noticed, hadn't been touched. Slim said, "Aren't you going to do something?" "Aren't you?" "You found them." "Well, it's your turn now." "No, it isn't. You found them. It's your fault. The whole thing. I was watching." "You joined in, Slim. You know you did." "I don't care. You found them. And that's what I'll say when they come here looking for us." Red said, "All right for you." But the thought of consequences inspired him anyway. He reached for the cage door. Slim said, "Wait!" Red was glad to. He said, "Now what's biting you?" "One of 'em's got something on his back, like it might be an iron or something." "Where?" "Right there. I saw it before, but I thought it was just part of him. But if he's people, maybe it's a disintegrator gun." "What's that?" "I read about it in the books before the wars. Mostly people with spaceships have disintegrator guns. They point them at you and you get disintegrated." "They didn't point it at us until now," pointed out Red with his heart not quite in it. "I don't care. I'm not hanging around here and getting disintegrated. I'm getting my father." "Cowardly cat. Yellow cowardly cat." "I don't care. You can call all the names you want. But if you bother them now, you'll get disintegrated. You wait and see. It will be all your fault." He made the narrow spiral stair that led to the main floor of the barn, stopped at its head, and then backed away. Red's mother was moving up, panting a little with exertion, and smiling a tight smile for the benefit of Slim in his capacity as guest. "Red, you! Red, are you up there? Don't try to hide. I know this is where you're keeping them. Cook saw where you ran with the meat." Red quavered, "Hello, Ma." "Now show me those nasty animals. I'm going to see that you get rid of them right away." It was over. And despite the imminent corporal punishment, Red felt something like a load fall from him. At least the decision was out of his hands. "Right there, Ma. I didn't do anything to 'em, Ma. I didn't know. They just looked like little animals, and I thought you'd let me keep 'em, Ma. I wouldn't have taken the meat, only they wouldn't eat grass or leaves, and we couldn't find good nuts or berries. And Cook never lets me have anything, or I would have asked her, and I didn't know it was for lunch, and..." He was speaking on sheer momentum of terror, and did not realize that his mother did not hear him, but, with eyes frozen and popping at the cage, was screaming in thin, piercing tones. Chapter 10. The astronomer was saying, "A quiet burial is all we can do. There's no point in any publicity now," when they heard the screams. She had not entirely recovered by the time she reached them, running and running. It was minutes before her husband could extract sense from her. She was saying finally, "I tell you they're in the barn. I don't know what they are. No, no." She barred the industrialist's quick movement in that direction. She said, "Don't you go. Send one of the hands with a shotgun. I tell you, I never saw anything like it. Little horrible beasts with... I can't describe it. To think that Red was touching them and trying to feed them. He was holding them and feeding them meat." Red began, "I only..." And Slim said, "It was not," the industrialist said quickly. "Now you boys have done enough harm today. March into the house. And not a word. Not one word. I am not interested in anything you have to say. After this is all over, I'll hear you out. And as for you, Red, I'll see that you are properly punished." He turned to his wife. "Now, wherever the animals are, we'll have them killed," he added quietly, once the youngsters were out of hearing. "Come, come. Children aren't hurt, and after all, they haven't done anything really terrible. They just found a new pet." The astronomer spoke with difficulty. "Pardon me, ma'am, but can you describe these animals?" She shook her head. She was quite beyond words. "Can you just tell me if they..." "I'm sorry," said the industrialist apologetically, "but I think I'd better take care of her. Will you excuse me?" "I'm sorry," the industrialist said apologetically, "but I think I'd better take care of her. Will you excuse me?" "I'm sorry," the industrialist said apologetically, "but I think I'd better take care of her. Will you excuse me?" "I'm sorry," the industrialist said apologetically, "A moment, please. One moment. She said she'd never seen such animals before." Surely it's not unusual to find animals that are completely unique on a stage such as this. I'm sorry, let's not discuss that now, except that unique animals might have landed during the night. The industrialist stepped away from his wife. What are you implying? I think we'd better go to the barn, sir. The industrialist stared a moment, turned, and suddenly and quite uncharacteristically began running. The astronomer followed, and the women's wail rose unheeding behind them. Chapter 11. The industrialist stared, looking at the astronomer, turned to stare again. Those, said the astronomer. I have no doubt we appear strange and repulsive to them. What do they say? Why, that they are uncomfortable and tired and even a little sick, but they are not seriously damaged, and that the youngsters treated them well. Treated them well, scooping them up, keeping them in cages, giving them grass and raw meat to eat. Tell me how to speak to them. It may take a little time. Think at them. Try to listen. It will come to you, but perhaps not right away. The industrialist tried. He grimaced with the effort of it, thinking over and over again. The youngsters were ignorant of your identity, and the thought was suddenly in his mind. We were quite aware of it, and because we knew they meant well by us accordingly to their own view of the matter, we did not attempt to attack them. Attack them, thought the industrialist, and said it out loud in his concentration. Why, yes, came the answer thought. We are armed. One of the revolting little creatures in the cage lifted a metal object, and there was a sudden hole in the top of the cage, and another in the roof of the barn, each hole rimmed with charred wood. We hope it will not be too difficult to make repairs, the creature thought. The industrialist found it impossible to organize himself to the point of direct thought. He turned to the astronomer. And with that weapon in their possession, they let themselves be handled and caged? I don't understand it. But the calm thought came. We would not harm the young of an intelligent species. It was twilight. The industrialist had entirely missed the evening meal and remained unaware of the fact. He said, Do you really think the ship will fly? If they say so, said the astronomer. I'm sure it will. They'll be back, I hope, before too long. And when they do, said the industrialist energetically, I will keep my part of the agreement. What is more, I will move sky and earth to have the world accept them. I was entirely wrong, Doctor. The creatures that would refuse to harm children under such provocation as they received are admirable. But you know, I almost hate to say this. Say what? The kids. Yours and mine. I'm almost proud of them. Imagine seizing these creatures, feeding them or trying to, and keeping them hidden. The amazing gall of it. Red told me it was his idea to get a job in the circus on the strength of them. Imagine! The astronomer said, Youth. The merchant said, We will be taking off soon. Half an hour, said the explorer. It's going to be a lonely trip back. All the remaining 17 of the crew were dead, and their ashes were to be left on a strange planet. But they would go with a limping ship and the burden of the controls entirely on himself. The merchant said it was a good business stroke, not harming the young ones. The merchant said, Will we be taking off soon? Half an hour, said the explorer. It's going to be a lonely trip back. All the remaining 17 of the crew were dead, and their ashes were to be left on a strange planet. Back they would go with the limping ship, and the burden of the controls entirely on himself. The merchant said, It was a good business stroke, not harming the young ones. We will get very good terms. Very good terms. The explorer thought. Business. The merchant then said, They've lined up to see us off. All of them. You don't think they're too close, do you? It would be bad to burn any of them with the rocket blast at this stage of the game. They're safe. Horrible-looking things, aren't they? Pleasant enough inside. Their thoughts are perfectly friendly. You wouldn't believe it of him. That immature one, the one that first picked us up. They call him Red, provided the explorer. That's a queer name for a monster. Makes me laugh. He actually feels bad that we're leaving. Only I can't make out exactly why. The nearest I can come to it is something about a lost opportunity with some organization or other that I can't quite interpret. A circus, said the explorer briefly. What? Why, that impertinent monstrosity. Why not? What would you have done if you had found him wandering on your native world, found him sleeping on a field, on Earth, red tentacles, 6 legs, pseudopods and all? Chapter 14. Red watched the ship leave. His red tentacles, which gave him his nickname, quivered their regret at the lost opportunity to the very last, and the eyes at the tips filled with drifting yellow crystals that were the equivalent of earthly tears. That nice little hook and twist at the end. Fabulous and to be expected by the great Asimov. Thank you for listening, dears. I hope you enjoyed this story. And if you did, please let me know. I always love to hear from you. So quoth this raven, and I will see you next time under the trees.